Welcome, everybody, from your part of the world. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to take you on a 30-minute journey, and we are going to explore the sacred geometry that's in our body, that's in nature, it's in the universe, and it's even in technology. So, we're going to discuss three chapters. So, part one is talking about the sacred geometry of crystals in the human body, which is a fascinating aspect of crystals because that's how we relate to to understand that crystals are even in our third eye, our ears, bones, blood, and even has to do with the water consciousness. And part two, we have crystals as taught to us by Marcel Vogel, how biology meets technology and how it's embedded in the cube. And the part three is the biology technology. So some crystals are very mysterious to us. As you can see here, we have this phantom crystal where one's embedded within the other. And that's partly the journey with crystals is the fascination with their diversity of forms. This one here is double terminated. A lot of crystals are coming out of Africa from before. So we're seeing nature's creation that's never ever been seen before. And we're learning how they're actually formed. This one here, we have the fluorite. This relates to the octahedral diamond like body, which is a field around us. And my journey has always been a fascination for crystals, how they actually respond to the mind and to geometry. And this put me on my journey to actually go deeper into understanding what sacred geometry is about. So, part one is crystals in the human body. This is one of my favorite chapters because the most significant point in our consciousness is our third eye, and we have a liquid crystal there in our gland called the pineal gland. This relates to how we can see auras, have higher vision, and to know things clairvoyant because crystals are living things. Crystals also appear in the eyes, in the rods and cones of our eyes. They appear in the inner ear. We're going to talk about that. There's crystals in the blood, in the bones. There's microcrystals on the enamel of your teeth, in the kidneys. In fact, we are a complete constituent of many, many different types of crystals. So I'll just talk a little bit about the ones in the inner ear. So this one's a fascinating topic because we know our eardrum if you put your finger in your ear, there's a canal. So that's called the semicircular canal. And there's a point where you get to the eardrum here. So we know the tympanic membrane or the eardrum protects the sacred part of the ear, which is called the utricle. Because over here we've got the semicircular canals, and just inside here, the semicircular canals, before that, in the utricle, we have what's called some special crystals. These are the crystals, they're like pencils. And sometimes when these pencils in the ears of like calcium carbonates, they end up further in the wrong place in the canals over here. And that's why people get dizzy. So that's really interesting to hear. This is a close up of the utricle here where the crystals are aligned. And then the canals lead with nerves to the actual brain. So it's a highly intelligent system that basically maintains balance. And this is all because of the otaconias, or the calcium carbonate crystals. Um, we also have crystals in our eyes. So at the back of our retina, we all know that the images that we see are inverted and we see things on the retina, but that's all based on carrot shaped particles called the rods and the cones. They're actually photosensitive rods, and that they are composed of crystalline structures. Also, we have crystals in the bones. Um, in the doctrine of signatures, we know that celery stick looks like the human thigh bone. So celery, which is composed of strong, elongated and porous fibers on an atomic level is based on the cube. But when we look on the cube, the atomic structure of bones, the crystals in the bones, are based actually on six pyramids. So this is called a square-based pyramid. And you can see that from the six faces of the cube, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you can visualize this square-based pyramid based on 60-degree angles, that's actually how bone becomes really powerful and strong, and why it's porous. But it's actually a crystal called calcium carbonates. So here's a close-up view of the 6 pyramids within the cube. I've shown it over here again, and there's another way of taking these cubes. If we take these pyramids from inside and stack them on the outside, if we glue these 6 pyramids on the outside, we end up with another shape that's called a rhombic dodecahedron. So it's 12 diamonds. So this originally was a cube, but we took the structure of bone and we stellated those shapes on the outside, and it forms what we call the rhombic dodeca. And this is actually the atomic structure of garnet crystal. So bones have a connection to a crystal that's called garnet crystal. So normally it's a bit red, but if you look closely, this raw crystal, unpolished, has 12 diamonds. So that's the interesting part of crystals, that the more we study them, they have a unique geometry. And later on in my courses, I go into the mathematics of root 2 and what it all means and how it differs from the golden ratio. So the jewel of the cube octahedron, there's a specific shape here. Like where did this shape come from, which relates to garnet crystal? It's actually composed of another geometry called the 12 around the 1. So this special shape here is one of the keys to the universe, but it's all connected to what we call crystalline fabric of structure and creation. More relevantly, we have crystals in the blood, so they're considered to be like a flattened torus. So here we have a torus which knows how to turn itself inside out. It connects the above and the below into a unified field. So blood is actually one of these shapes that is considered to be what we call a flattened torus. And the plural of torus is the tori. So, and the redness that you see here is because of the crystals called iron or hematite. Fish, some scientists did some research on fish, and they're studying how does the fish maintain its vertical balance as it's swimming through the water. And that's because in its head, it has a crystal called aragonite. It's kind of like a 3-dimensional crystal, but a 3-dimensional cross is really is the 3 axes inside the cube. So this basically every crystal is of cubic origin. So here we have aragonite, and this is linked also to another crystal that's called staurolite. So this is called crystal twinning, when crystals can grow through their own axes. So this crystal cross is called staurolite, related to aragonite, which gives the fish navigational balance. And you can see here on this church in Egypt, they have the Coptic cross. So that's the 3-dimensional cross of aragonite. So it's interesting that the sacred geometry in our body is reflected also in the outer world. So here's a cluster of staurolites, which again is this fascination. How do crystals even grow and form these amazing cross-like shapes? The original word for crystal in the Greek meant ice, because that's got to do with the frozen part of water, which is a hexagonal geometry. And we believe that crystals hold the entire memory of the earth. So this crystal I'm showing you here is a bit like this one here. And essentially a crystal has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when we talk about technology and crystals, we're talking about 6 circles that go around the 1. And whereas biology is more based on the 5, but we need the 5 pentagon and the 6 hexagon to enhance what we call our astral health. So crystals are here to assist us on our journey. Even though it's a mystery, like what water is, we are composed of 70% water. We are literally water on 2 legs. And water has many, many properties that goes back to sacred geometry. So the reason I've been talking about pentagons and hexagons is that when we look inside our DNA, it's composed entirely of pentagons and hexagons, like I showed you with the shapes. So that means the crystalline structure of our DNA is intimately connected to our astral health. So And when we're talking about astral health, everything in life really comes back to fear or love. And these elements of fear and love influence the crystals in our body to resonate in a certain way. So fear is contraction and love is expansion. So this is the DNA model that's very famous. You've got the pentagons joining to the hexagons. So this is the a slice. It's called a transverse cut of a spiral staircase. If you visualize the DNA helix like a long tube, this is the geometric memory of DNA. So I call it pentahexa. This is the 3D view of DNA molecule. And just to conclude with the medical, we have the ancient Egyptians powdered these crystals and actually ate them. They ingested crystals because, same as the Tibetans, they do that with their medicine as well. But the extraordinary colors that we get from lapis and emeralds were used to adorn and beautify the body because the body was a temple to them. So let's go to part 2. This is how crystals connect with technology. We'll talk about Marcel Vogel and how he invented the LCD screen. So this is the classic image of a Vogel crystal. It's been shaped and has 24 sides or 108 sides. All the sides actually give it more frequency. But just notice that there's a pyramid angle here of 52 degrees. And the other angle here is 60 degrees. And those two critical angles depend on how energy can be given out or received for healing, for pulling out energy out of the body or amplifying. It relates back to the tree of life. There's a lot of cosmic knowledge connected to these Vogel crystals. But ultimately what it's about harmonic resonance, because the future in medicine is what we call vibrational healing. So crystals have always contained these essential frequencies for healing. But when you double that 51 minute angle, or 52 degrees, double that is 104. And that's actually the bond angle of the water molecule. So that's why crystals relate to water in that sense. So there's that angle in the pyramid. That relates to Kepler's triangle. There's that 52 degree that's in the Vogel crystal. And this also contains the mathematics of the 5-pointed star, the golden ratio. So the bond water angle, as I said before, is 104 degrees. And that makes the connection between crystals and light and water, because when we talk about memory, because all crystals store memory, mem is the water in ancient Hebrew and the ori is the light. So when we talk about memory, we're talking about liquid light. So Marcel Vogel did an experiment. He transferred his thoughts onto a plate of crystals. So he got all these crystals on a plate. The crystals were called the oleates of cholesterol, and they were sensitive to thoughts. So when he visualized and meditated upon an image in his third eye of Mother Mary, he was able to transfer the image and see it externally. And that gave him the idea to develop the liquid crystal screen called the LCD. So this was an amazing experiment that changed the world, because right now you wouldn't be viewing this webinar right now if we didn't have this LCD screen. So thank you, Marcel. Another question is, what do you think a crystal castle in the air really is? Well, most people do know it is a satellite, because the piezoelectric properties of quartz made it possible for spacecraft to have electronic equipment. And this was a revolution, and it happened around 1957 was the first time anything was ever put into above the earth, and it was by the Russians in 1957 in October, and it was a monumental event, because that forced the Americans to advance their technology, and it created the space race. So that was called the Sputnik. I have another photo of it here, and it went around the Earth 1,400 times, traveling at speeds at 29,000. And then they did more experiments where they put the first dog in space. But this was the emergence of crystal technology. And what's interesting is that by the time we get like to the 1980s or late 1970s, the first satellites that were put in space was called the crystal. It actually was called the Evolved Enhanced Crystal System. And what it did was it created the first American spy satellites. We call it electro-optical digital imaging. So I just wanted to let you know that the first name of a satellite was the Crystal. And here you can see the image of the Americans taking the first photo of a communist a plane, a jet bomber in China, from 200 miles in space. So this is the technology. This is hexagon. This is crystal. We would not have this ability right now to be where we are right now with our mobile phones and our devices if it wasn't for the advancement of crystals. And ultimately, the Earth is a living crystal, and satellites are confirming from the imagery that we have a toroidal field around us, around the Earth and around our body. And that's the definition of a fractal field, because fractal is when the inside is the same as the outside. We are connected to the Earth grid. We are connected to the atoms of crystals and therefore to the galaxy. So this is all about frequency. We see this frequency in the planets. Saturn and Jupiter have 60-year cycles because in harmonic maths, the number 6 can relate to 60, 600, 6,000. So we see the planets of Saturn and Jupiter creating 60-year cycles, and they do it in the golden ratio, which is something we'll talk about later. But the golden ratio is pent, and they also create hexagon cycles. So 5 and 6 relates planetary cycles way back to our DNA. So when we think of 60, we think of the clock. So these are really time codes. And the reason why I talk about 60 is because we're coming up to Tesla, who says that the ideal frequency for all electricity is 60 hertz. When we study the mathematics of the Fibonacci numbers, it always repeats at 60. It has a 60 cycle and a 24 cycle. I won't explain that now, but the mathematics of living things of 5 is intimately connected to the structure of 6, the cube. So the beauty of the cube is that it has the ability to store memory. That's why this computer that we're working with right now can store billions of bits of information. And the fundamental shape of it is called the star tetrahedron. So if I join these 8 corners, you can see it actually forms the cube. So the star tetra is your Merkaba, your light vehicle. And we have Walter Russell, who worked a lot on the inside of the cube, and he's basically saying that all crystals are essentially cubic. And you can see here that there's the 3 planes. There's the X, Y, and Z axis, and that contains and stores billions and trillions of bits of information. So that's what we're talking about, is that the atomic structure of quartz, when we examine it at the microcosmic level, is the star tetrahedron, which I have over here again. This is done in glass, but this essential shape of 2 triangles interlacing, which you know as the Star of David, is actually in 3Ds. They interpenetrate each other, and these at the center of this cubic structure is what we call it. There's actually a diamond. So if you pulled off these 8 tetrahedron, there's what we call the diamond light body. So this is why we can actually enhance our spiritual health and memory by tuning into crystals and thanking them. And this brings up the question, like, should crystals be left in the ground? Because there's a big debate whether we should just leave them in the ground. But we also believe that the crystals that grow deep within the earth, they've made their journey out of the darkness to assist humanity to heal and to connect. And just for the last chapter, this is the conclusion on part 3. We're calling it Tesla and 60 Hertz. Tesla was the most remarkable man. His most famous quote was saying that in a crystal, we have clear evidence of the existence of a formative life principle. And though we cannot understand the life of a crystal, it is nonetheless a living being. And that's one of my most favorite quotes, because Tesla was perhaps one of the greatest minds in this last few centuries, and he did a lot of work with crystals. He's saying that they're living beings, and look at what he gave us: electricity, radio, television, Wi-Fi, radar, X-rays, Kirlian photography. In 1926, he invented the first cell phone. So if you're using a mobile phone, you have to give gratitude to his work. If you use a remote on the TV or a laser beam, so this is his work, which is all about the harnessing of light. And to harness light, we need crystals. So many people try to take his work and use it in other ways, and he just kept inventing other things. So he's saying here that a genius requires solitude. This is the secret of invention. So he tuned in to all living things, and he basically said that the ideal frequency for electricity is 60 cycles per second, or 60 hertz, but we know that other countries are doing their electricity like with 50 hertz. So we need to recalibrate and align ourselves with the living mathematics of nature. He also said that crystals vibrate every second. A crystal vibrates at 2 times 2. If you multiplied 2 by 2 15 times, the number is 32,768 times per second. So he understood that this is what we call frequency or vibration. There's beautiful magic squares. Later on, when we talk about magic squares in other courses, you'll see that when you multiply any 3 numbers on this magic square, they all add up to that magic sum of 32,768, because this is the desired pulse of 1 second. And these numbers here are all based on what we call the doubling sequence: 2, 4, 8, 16. So when we study crystals, we're studying binary codes, doubling sequence, golden ratio, magic squares. So this is why crystals are in the mass consciousness. And just to conclude a bit on Tesla, without crystals, we wouldn't have the first electric car was based on the harmonics of light on crystals in 1931. So we're not talking about the modern day Tesla who's sending rockets out into space. We're talking about Tesla in the 1920s. In 1931, he built the first car, and it ran on a frequency, and the frequency was based on an antenna that was exactly 6.944 feet. And just to explain why that's important is that when we take the harmonics of light, we think of light as 144,000 grid arcs of grid per second. So when we divide this number 144 into unity consciousness, 1 divided by 144 is 0.0069444. And if we slide this decimal, this is what harmonic maths is about. Harmonic maths means we can add and take zeros, or we can slide the decimal and get 6.94, and that's the length in feet that Tesla attached to his Pierce Arrow automobile. So I just wanted to let you know that there's this amazing harmonic mathematics that's been not talked about or learnt at school, but it's the key to the harmonics of what we call the Earth grid. So Tesla did a lot of experiments with quartz. He resonated them, and he noticed that they have a piezoelectric field. We know that if we take one quartz here, and if we had another quartz, and when you hit them like this, a smoke or a dust, a light comes off. So if you did this in the dark, tapping crystals, you'll see light coming off the crystals, because crystals are frozen light. So Tesla knew this, and he used this knowledge of the emanating field to come to the conclusion that, oh my God, Earth, the whole planet Earth is a conductor made to resonate at an electrical frequency. We call it the Schumann resonance. So Tesla's work inspired the concept of 6 is hexagon, 60 hertz, 600, 6,000. So when we, as we're entering the highly advanced technological age, we can see that what artificial intelligence is based on is it's all the hexagons. So this is what we call nanotech, but it's really based on what we call the flower of life, the seed of life. But what's governing this sixness is the 60 hertz, which is the ideal component for currents. So just quickly, we have the origin, the circle, when it can walk around itself 6 times. So this creates what we call the seed of life, and it's all in the golden ratio. So you can test this by putting 6 coins around the 1. So this is called carbon 7 molecule. which is based around 6 coins around the one. It's in nature. We see it in the eucalyptus pod. But essentially, when we look at the Star of David or the hexagon, we're talking about the atomic structure of quartz. And this is a hand-drawn diagram of silicon dioxide done in 1991 by my colleague David Mankey. It's just showing us the invisible quantum world. But crystals and technology are making visible what was once invisible thanks to microscopes, which are crystals, thanks to telescopes, which are crystals. In sacred geometry, you learn that when we start putting other layers of 6 around the 1 and another 6, we end up with a geometry called Metatron's cube, which creates all the 5 platonic solids. It's a multi-dimensional blueprint of form. It's the cube within the cube, and that's what we call the 4th dimensional tesseract. But it all comes back to the cube. In other courses, I talk more about the 60 code. So when we look again at these Fibonacci numbers 1, 1, 2, 3, etc., it breaks down to nothing but sixes. There's harmonic codes inside of this that add up to 6,666. So these are very in-depth revelations. But when we extend this knowledge from 660 to 600, we can see that the 4th dimension of an icosahedron, which is this shape here, this has got 20 triangles, but when we look at the 4th dimensional view of this, it has 600 prisms, and you can see it here as an animation. So this is called multi-dimensional polytopes or hyperdimensional geometry. And then we examine the shadow of that. We get beautiful mandalas that we can use in our circuitry. The next level of technology will be based on sacred geometry because it's obeying or aligning to the correct geometry, to the frequency of the earth. And then we have 6,000 feet, which is the number of feet in a 1 nautical mile. So you can see that the sacred geometry of crystal is all based on 6, 60, 600, 6,000. And so it all essentially comes back to the hexagon, the crystal, the 4 circles that you see here of the Archimedean solid. This is the blueprint of form. So these 4 circles are the 4 hexagons. And this leads us to the story of Atlantis, because this knowledge of hexagons and 60 and 6,000 was known, we believe, by ancient cultures 12,000 years ago in Atlantis, where they actually had whole crystals, whole cities built of crystals, which is something for our human mind difficult to understand. So this was written about by Plato, who was a student of Pythagoras, and he wrote about it in his books called the Timaeus. And we can see here that Atlantis was an amazing city, but something happened to it. There was a misuse of this high tech that allowed them to build such fantastic structures. So each crystal, I believe, is not only a living being, but it's a vast library of information that we can access. And we can use this in our technology. And we believe that crystals are essentially highly ordered and intelligent systems whose atoms and ions and molecules reveal vast repeating patterns. Because right now we wouldn't be having social media if it wasn't for the crystals that store all the knowledge of the algorithms. So I believe that we need to clean up the planet first before we start heading to the stars. We actually need to honor the ecology of the earth. We call it ecosophy. So it's not about how much knowledge we have, it's about how much heart and love that we have, is to keep the contents of this earth pure and aligned to living things. So I hope you enjoyed all this knowledge, and I'd like to just conclude and let you know that if you would like to have more information, I have a sacred geometry e-course. It's called Crystal Connections. If you want to understand many, many more hours of this information, because this knowledge essentially is the blueprint of creation. So in this Crystal Connections online course, we have 23 pre-recorded lessons, 4 hours of video content, and there is a lifetime access to it. And just recognize that today we only scratch the surface, because there's a lot more content with the symmetries of crystals in health, in medicine, and in technology. And it's so much amazing information that you can learn at your own pace. It's normally valued at $550, but stay with me, because there's a gift for you watching this today. I have a bonus that I'd like to give you, which is actually a recording of this webinar. If you want a copy of this, that comes with the e-course as well. And I also, if you have questions, I'm also active in the forum. So when you get this e-course and you want to ask any questions, I'll be there to dialogue with you. And I also have a certificate of completion, so that you can actually print this out and have it on your wall. And also, as another bonus, I like to give you the best of all the social media posts that I've done over the last 10 years, which is, many, many incredible snippets of very diverse knowledge on crystals and sacred geometry. But today, because you're watching this webinar, I'd actually like to make the offer that you can actually have this e-course for $275. And this means it's half price, and it's just for a limited time only. And some people, they ask me questions through the registrations. We get many questions, and here's a question from Brad of Germany. He asked, "Can I talk to you inside the course?" Yes, you can comment on any video, and I'm actively answering all questions inside the forum. So I would say to Brad, yes, if you would like to know more, just click on the link below and you'll get a 50% off. Sue from Canada said, "I'm not good at maths. Will this be too advanced for me?" And there are no prerequisites to join, because this content is suitable for all. So Sue, click on the link below for 50% off. And then Julia from Italy says, "I don't have time, but I really want to learn." We offer a lifetime access, so the lessons are pre-recorded to enjoy at your own space. So click the link below and it's all there for you. So as I said before, this is a one-time offer of $275. It's half price. So I'd like to conclude on a quote. When we connect with a crystal, we pay respect to its time with us and all that it emits, appreciating that it has left its home deep inside the earth to karmically be with us, to teach us the correct use of technology. This is the lesson of Atlantis, to help us to wake up to emit love. Have a great day, and I really hope that you benefited and enjoyed from this presentation. Thank you.